Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from my side. Good morning, good evening for wherever you are joining us in. Welcome to this exceptional webinar that is meaningfully engaging young people for HIV prevention. My name is Nadu Raja Adigo. I'm a SSLN champion from Ghana, and I'm delighted to be co-chairing this webinar with my colleague Trevor from Botswana. So without wasting much time, just want to get into it. Just by way of house rules, please, if you are not speaking, kindly turn your microphones off so that we can have a smooth sailing webinar. And also, if you want to keep your video on, you can do so, and understand maybe because of network issues, you might put your video off to increase your bandwidth. This will be all for now. And when it's time for questions, you will want to use the reaction symbol in the tabs below so that you are duly called, or you can submit questions in the chat box. We are hoping to have an exciting webinar, and I know you are equally excited as I am. By way of opening remarks, just want to share that this webinar is of great essence. As we all know, the world population is about 8 billion now, and young people are a significant cohort of these numbers. And technically, when it comes to the HIV response, most young people, especially between the age of 10 to 24, are left behind. Owing to new levels of HIV incidence, likewise existing prevalence. We also know there are low levels of diagnosis and treatment coverage for young people than adults. And also in terms of national and local programming, only target young people who are so beneficial, which is good. But there's a need to expedite and see young people as collaborators, as innovators, and even as leaders to champion the agenda of ensuring that HIV and AIDS is duly eradicated by 2030. It is my hope as a chair that I carry on this conversation from our well-seasoned speakers who are here to share with us, and also to hear from young people how to make sure young people are not only listened to by head and actions are taken. So we are duly and meaningfully engaged to make sure that we have an HIV-free world. Having said that, I want to quickly proceed to inviting Ms. Petiso Mashanini, pardon me for the wrong pronunciation. Just by way of introducing her, she is an analyst at Genesis Analytics, where she works on the SYCONA project that looks at translating evidence into actions for adolescent girls and young women programs. Tefisio is currently enrolled in the master's programming in health innovation and aspires to support the development of youth-led health innovations which attend to bigger health challenges of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Tefisio will be giving us the background to and the purpose of the webinar. So Ms. Tefisio, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Many people feel left out by the vision of the future. It is particularly concerning when the youth feel this exclusion more acutely. In projects that we work on at Genesis, we ask ourselves, what does it look like to create solutions that we need and desire in this world? Through our work on the South to South Learning Network and SYCONA, we have seen countries and stakeholders identify the need to ensure that youth are meaningfully engaged in developing solutions that are designed and implemented for them. We believe in creating meaningful youth engagement. But what does that mean? Well, we hope to find out today. Through the South-to-South Learning Network, which was established to support the Global HIV Prevention Coalition to strengthen country HIV prevention programs through shared learning and networking, we discovered that there was a gap in understanding how to meaningfully include the youth and ensure that their voices find full expression in the development of health innovations that impact their lives. Similarly, in SYCONA, which is an initiative that aims to support the synthesis of adolescent girls and young women HIV prevention research, we realized that even in the research and monitoring landscape, there are questions that still exist on how to measure and monitor meaningful youth engagement. These gaps have necessitated the creation of a platform which explores ways we can engage with the youth meaningfully in a manner that honors their fundamental human rights, their agency and autonomy, and their need for safe spaces. We are exploring this topic through skills building sessions, case studies, and today's webinar. Mo, if you can change the slide to our objectives for today. The objectives of today's webinar will be to define meaningful youth engagement through your collective voices and experiences, to respond to the frequently highlighted gaps on meaningful youth engagement in HIV prevention responses, as identified by the National PSAP process, to explore and share experiences, lessons, and insights in terms of what meaningful engagement is, to provide practical examples of how to assess the levels of meaningful youth engagement using the Uproot scorecard and the Young People Network on Sexual and Reproductive Health, HIV and AIDS monitoring tools for meaningful youth engagement. And lastly, to reinforce the need for meaningful youth engagement of young people in HIV prevention program design, implementation, and monitoring. We welcome you all to this webinar and hope that when the session closes, we continue to collaborate in ensuring that our voices are heard and that we are included meaningfully. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So it is indeed our goal that at the end of this webinar, there are collective voices and we collaborate to ensure that meaningful youth engagement is much more inclusive. Thank you so much. And so we are going to proceed to the next. I want to introduce our next speaker, Nyasha Sitole, a dynamic young professional, advocate and champion for gender equality, ending inequalities, aim for improved access to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Likewise, comprehensive HIV prevention services and information for young people. Nyasha envisions a world where all young people in their diversities are able to challenge existing inequalities and fully enjoy their sexual and reproductive health and rights. She is currently engaged at Men Engage Alliance as the project officer. Now, Natasha will be giving us in-depth on the experiences, insights, and lessons on meaningful youth engagement. Over to you, Ms. Nyasha.
Thank you very much, Nadu, and thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to this session. And my sincere apologies, I would have loved for everybody to see my lovely face, but I've just been struggling with the technology, especially in putting back my video after I had put a virtual background on Zoom. So I'm so honored to be the first speaker in this session because issues around meaningful youth engagement in HIV prevention I am very passionate about because this has been my life since I joined National AIDS Council as a youth intern in 2015, and I was supporting the Young People's Network in Zimbabwe. And over all those years, it has been an amazing journey for me until I even co-founded, and I'm currently supporting a young women-led network in Zimbabwe called DAWA as well, and we are focusing around access to sexual and reproductive health and rights for adolescent girls and young women, including HIV prevention. So I'm really honored to be here and to be the first speaker in setting the pace. So I totally agree with what Tsepiso said with one of the objectives, which is objective number 1, which says we're here to define and really agree what is meaningful youth engagement in HIV prevention, because there's so many definitions out there, but then I guess what can help us really practicalize and contextualize this is for us to have this kind of conversations, to open our minds, open our hearts, open our spaces, and have that kind of understanding of where do we want to go. So we're going to do an interesting activity. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So could I also have the Mentimeter link shared in the chat? So I'm going to ask you to get into this Mentimeter and then just type that when you hear the phrase meaningful youth engagement in one word, what does this mean to you? And we can do this for the next 3 minutes. Okay, Karabo has just put the link to the Mentimeter and the code is up there. Karabo, the link seems like it's not clickable. Because we would like to access the Mentimeter without logging in, but just taking us straight to the survey. Okay, there is the link again from Carrie. So can we kindly click on the link and then you can put on the code that is 29223845. It's also on top of the slide. 29223845. And in the event that you cannot access the Mentimeter, please also feel free to type in the chat box. Please also feel free to type in the chat box, like when you hear the phrase meaningful youth engagement in one word, what does this mean to you? There we go. Thank you. Involvement, empowerment, participation, real, future, head, involve, voice, inclusion, young people are partners, seen as stakeholders, empowered, tokenism's opposite, transparency, heard. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for these reflections on what this means to you. Thank you. I also see in the chat leadership, future, conversations, engagement, inclusive, all these brilliant reflections on what does meaningful youth engagement mean for you. And the next question. Seen as stakeholders, transparency, considerations. I love all these reflections. Key, interesting. There is the word key. Then the second question on our Mentimeter, do you feel confident that in your line of work, you have meaningfully engaged young people? So here we just have yes, no, or maybe. Okay. You can also put the answers in the chat box. Okay, 46 yes, 8% no, 46 maybe. Scales are tipping, 39% yes, 58 maybe. No, 5%. Okay, I also see variables in the chat, yes, no, Yes, maybe, yes. Beautiful reflections. Right. So, I would have loved to continue getting these insights, but then we have to continue the presentation. So I'm going to. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing these honest reflections. I think this is the kind of conversations that we always thrive or always want to be part of, because I'm seeing here that in all our diversity here, 41% are very confident that they have really engaged young people in the work that they do, not just engage, but meaningfully. 5% are very honest to say no. Then 55% have also said, maybe we're not sure. So I'm going to be sharing with you as we move forward with this conversation about some of my experiences and also the work that I've supported, so that at the end of this, if we're going to be able probably to do the survey again, then would ask, how do you feel after all these conversations about meaningful youth engagement and about meaningful youth engagement, as well as the reflections from the presentation. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Next slide, please. All right, so in the work that I've done over the past years and being a youth advocate myself, and also supporting various networks of young people that focus on sexual and reproductive health and HIV, and then also the work that I've grown to do in the portfolio on HIV prevention, as I've been consulting and discussing with the young people to then really try and unpick what is meaningful youth engagement. So the definition really, it depends, and it's very variable on how you want to contextualize this. But I think we could have an agreement to say, when we talk about meaningful youth engagement, there are some principles, or rather we can say an agreed code of conduct or way of doing things that we really believe, if we're able to stick to this, it can really give us the opportunity and the platform to actually sit back and say, yes, we have meaningfully engaged young people, or young people themselves feel that they've been meaningfully engaged. So I'm going to share with you 5 of the principles that we even use at DAWA when we're working with their young women in their diversity. And I've seen these principles really supporting a lot of the work that has to do around HIV prevention and young people. And the first one will be, instead of talking about engagement, participation, how about we talk of partnership? So when we talk about the principle of partnership, what we are saying is there is equal footing, equal decision-making, and the space is open for everybody to come in and be a partner. So I always struggle with the statement which says beneficiary when we're referring to young people who are being supported by projects that we implement. But instead, how about we look at young people as rights holders? So that means if young people are seen as right holders, that means what you engage in when you are supporting them or implementing something, it's partnership. There is no beneficiary there. So that first principle would be partnership. Then the second one looks at the issue around mentorship and actually building capacities. So it's one thing creating spaces for young people to engage in. And then it's also another thing to ensure that young people meaningfully get to engage in the spaces. That takes a lot of intentionality, a lot of resources, which could even include time or in-person resources. And this can also be done through mentorship. And this mentorship can either be adults to young people mentorship or actually peer-to-peer mentorship. Then the third principle will be the recognition of diversity and intersecting identities. It's always frustrating when you get in a space and there's always an assumption that every young person is homogeneous. As long as you're 15 to 24, 15 to 35, you're all the same. This is what we're going to get for you in HIV prevention. If it's going to be it's going to be PrEP, then all of you 15 to 24 young women, you should just be on PrEP. So this is the kind of advocates that we are doing, and also challenging that if you're going to really engage me meaningfully for me to be able to access that service, could you please recognize the diversity that comes with me being a person? So that's where we talk about also intersecting identities that could actually be geographically related, sexual orientation or gender identity, and even looking at the educational levels. Like I know in our ZDHIS in Zimbabwe, we also get to measure versus young people or people who are educated and people who are not, to look at the issues like around gender-based violence and how does it play out, economies of scale, all of this. It's all about recognizing diversity. Then the issue of commitment in practice. This comes in both ways as a principle. Commitment in practice to the people who are capable of creating spaces for young people to engage in, and to the people who are capable of influencing the engagement of young people in those spaces. What we need is commitment, and this commitment can even range from political commitment, social commitment, looking at the communities where we come from and the social norms that guide our commitments, our societies when we get to talk and do work around HIV prevention. This has to be more than words, but it actually has to be a code that is really practiced. Then we also talk, for me, what's important is ethical. Usually when you talk about issues of ethics, they are really recognized and talked about most often when there's a research that is involved. But personally, I feel when we talk about meaningful youth engagement of young people, we cannot leave the word ethical. And this comes into the realization that there are so many things that happen in the spaces that we want to engage with, whether at country level, community level, at global level. And if ethics are not applied, the normal ethics that we know when there's research happening, like do no harm, and all the other ethics that we know, if these ethics are not included or are not used as guiding principles in meaningful youth engagement, there is open spaces or chances for even abuse, open spaces for harassment, for the young people to get comfortable and be able to engage in that space, whether it's an advocate space or it's driving demand for HIV prevention commodities. So for me, these are like the 5 principles that I would say are very key when we talk about meaningful youth engagement. Next slide, please. So many of you could ask, like, is this really practical? And this goes to those probably who were like, maybe. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of the 2 projects that I know of. The first one, I practically led it in Zimbabwe, and it was done for, in a way, also to also prove what happens when you really invest resources, the capacity for young people to lead. Does it bring a change or it does not work? Then the second one is also something that I've respected, that I've seen young people given the space to work on, and it has really brought along brilliant results. So the first one is a project that I supported the implementation, a national HIV prevention advocacy project in Zimbabwe called Connecting to Lead, a GYW leading HIV prevention in the new decade. So this project focused on supporting adolescents and girls and young women from 14 high HIV incidence districts in Zimbabwe. And the idea behind this project was to say, if young people are going to make an impact, we need to focus on movement building and applying all the principles that I've shared before, to be in partnership with young people, to provide mentorship, to be very intentional with how we get young people involved, and to make people aware of the ethics that are needed when you're going to be involving young people in a space. So we got to train 36 adolescent girls and young women. And from this 36, what we did was to mix up the group to have seasoned advocates and those that are new and emerging. And here we're trying to promote a space for peer mentorship and peer learning within the young people as the advocates themselves. And what this project really resulted in is we had an unexpected result, which included developing an advocacy brief around HIV prevention for AGYW in Zimbabwe. And why I would say unexpected, because what we thought with the project, we're going to do the trainings, we're going to do the community dialogues, we're going to do the linkages with National AIDS Council. And probably we're going to produce something that would give us guidance. But it was so amazing that after this kind of a connection in advocate space, the young women came back and say, you know what, Nyasha, we need to be able to come up with a document that can further guide us in the work that we do. Then we produced an advocacy brief. So this was happened with the technical support and resources from the Global HIV Prevention Coalition through UNAIDS. And what they did was to say, okay, this is the project idea you have. Here are the resources. Here's the capacity. And the capacity that I had was me being part of the Global HIV Prevention Coalition and getting mentorship from the organizations that are already part of the coalition, like Frontline AIDS, AVAC, etc. And then we made this happen. Then the second one I will share is Y Plus Global. I think a year ago, they developed a guide which is called We Matter Value Us. And this guide focuses on supporting how organizations can ethically, the issue of ethics involve young people living with HIV. So this guide really extends to even share about when you're supporting a young person to attend or participate in a space, have you thought about how they are probably getting the visa? Have you thought about the transport that they might even need from their home to go to the airport? Have you thought about the kind of prep or capacity that they need before they get to engage in a space? So this is like those two spaces that I feel like I've practical examples of how young people have been engaged. And I see Carrie has shared in the chat that resource, and we'll also share the link for the advocacy brief. Next slide, sorry.
Okay, so all right. I was even coming to prompt Nyasha that the time is exhausted. So I'll just give you about 1 minute to just wrap up.
Thank you. So I'm just noticing I had updated my slides. So I will share in 1 minute, the lessons learned in all this are that, firstly, when you're thinking about practicalizing meaningful youth engagement, collectively start by defining what meaningful youth engagement means in your work and in your context. Secondly, let the young people lead and play a supportive role. Thirdly, commit resources which can both be financial and technical. Fourth, institutionalize the process and the approach. And when we talk about institutionalization, as we are doing this process of engaging, sometimes we get stuck when there's only one champion in a whole organization. And if that person is no longer the organization, then you know the agenda of meaningful youth engagement is down the drain. That's why we need institutionalization. Then the last point would be promote peer learning amongst the young people. As young people, we are able and capable to even mentor and peer support each other for there to be meaningful youth engagement, because we have walked the path, we know how to retrace back and also support our peers. So for me, I think this will be what I can share when it comes to us setting the pace, setting our mind frame around meaningful youth engagement of young people in HIV prevention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyasha. That was a very insightful and packed one. For me, the takeaway when it comes to the 5 principles, like you said, often we don't normally think about the ethical bit of it or restrict it to research, but it's good to protect young people so that they are not exploited. And also, if we want to advance meaningful youth engagement, like you said, by way of creating, we need to commit resources, both human, financial. Likewise, enable young people, play supportive role, and lastly, advance peer learning. Thank you so much. I know we may have questions, so kindly note your questions from all the presentations. There will be a time for Q&A, and you'll be given the opportunity to do so. At this juncture, I want to hand over to my co-host, Trevor, to introduce himself and take over. Trevor, over to you.
Hi, Nadu. Thank you for the opportunity. And I must say the conversation is really interesting. And, you know, one of the things which I managed to pick up from the rest of the conversation from the presenters, it's about legal and policy consideration that, you know, we must, you know, reevaluate the laws that limit access to sexual reproductive health and HIV services. This includes third-party consent policies must be removed to ensure that we have non-discriminatory healthcare, especially when it comes to issues of law on drug use, sex work, sex exploitation, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender and queer identities. I think those are the kind of things we need to really consider as we go on. For me, I'm excited to be joining this conversation, and I'm excited to be introducing the next speakers on the program. Firstly, I will introduce Venetia Fernandez. Agnes Fernandez is a member of the Global Partnership Forum for the CSE Advocacy Working Group, the PAC's core lead for partnership and resource mobilization, for resource mobilization and the International AIDS Society. She is the secretary of the Human Torch Foundation in Goa, India, and a youth-focused organization that works in area of HIV, TB, CSE, and drug use. She has a degree in microbiology and postgraduate degree in biochemistry. She also strives to empower young people in India, underprivileged community via scientific ideas. And I think it's probably very important for me to let Venetia Agnes Fernandez to go on with her presentation before I get to introduce the next speaker. Venetia, you're up.
Never done before. Hi, this is Venetia Fernandez. As introduced to you, I am the Partnership and Resource Mobilization co-lead for the Pact. And as you see, we are with you today to take you through the journey of Uproot, redefining how to engage adolescents and youth effectively. This will be taken up by my chair, that is Econom for you. And as you see, Uproot is a tool, a strong tool, focusing towards inequality, discrimination, stigma, and violence. Next slide, please. So who is the Pact? The Pact is a vibrant global coalition of more than 152 youth-led and youth-serving organizations working collaboratively and strategically in the global HIV response since 2013. We have been building solidarity across youth organizations to ensure the health, well-being, and human rights of all young people. As this says, we are all about young people, and we do give full preference to whatever the say would be from the youth, right from ground to the global levels. So I request my chair to take over the presentation from here.
Hi, Venetia.
Thank you, Venetia. If probably you allow me, Mr. Econom, to introduce you.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Started. Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Hello.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. If you don't mind, you could allow me to introduce you if you allow that. Yes. Mr. Econom holds a bachelor's degree of biochemistry from the University of Calabar in Nigeria. He earned certificate in leadership and management in global health and project management in the global health from the University of Washington. Currently, he is in the UN's youth leader for the West and Central Africa and the chair of the PACT, a global coalition of 152 youth-led and youth-serving organizations working within the sexual reproductive health and HIV movement. Econom is currently a board member for the Family Planning FP 2030 and the board member of the Initiative of the Rights and Gender Equality, a youth-led organization established in 2020 whose primary focus is to protect and promotion and fulfillment of rights, meaningful inclusion and programming of the the LGBTQI community. The LGBTQI women. Excuse me for that. You have to.
All right. Thank you very much. Just to say, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to, share our initiatives on how we've been able to, engage youth, young key populations across country level. And just like our resource and partnership focal point, Venetia Fernandez has actually said, for the pact, we believe in the meaningful adolescent and youth engagement of all young persons, young key populations, and we work within the intersections of HIV, communication around the prevention of, and also to ensure that young people are actually the ones, driving the process at the country level while we provide technical and financial support. So I would allow you to go to the next slide. All right, thank you. So you've all been hearing about Uproot, and I just want to tell you that before I became chair, I worked on the Uproot as the Nigerian focal point, and that was back in 2017. And personally, being part of this process has actually showed a lot of impact around advocating, that is in terms of evidence advocacy, and also ensuring that you are able to measure how youth are being engaged within the HIV response at country level, not necessarily saying a word of mouth, but actually to showcase a result like a scorecard, like a shadow report, to say, oh, this is where we are in terms of engaging young people. So a bit about Uproot. Just to clarify, Uproot Report Scorecard is a monitoring tool. So it's a youth-led monitoring tool. And why it's called youth-led is because during the ideation phase, youths and young key population across global level and regional level, that's including patient networks, were involved in the development of the Uproot itself. So that's why it was called youth-led. And in terms of being youth-led, which actually leverages on a youth-led social accountability mechanism in ensuring that the youths are actually the one gathering the data and also using that data, to advocate, to address issues that are reflected in the scorecard. So it was being supported by UNAIDS, and currently till now, we're about to go into the more like the third phase of the project, and it's also being funded by UNAIDS and in collaboration with USAID. And I just want to tell you that the implementation has actually showcased a lot of successes, which I'll be sharing later. So the Uproot agenda itself ran until 2020, and we scaled up in 2022. And as well, we are currently doing that for 2023. So from the word itself, uproot, so it's more like, uprooting inequalities at country level. Those inequalities that prevent young people from accessing comprehensive HIV prevention services. Those issues, it uproots those issues that stands as a barrier to young people when accessing comprehensive sexuality, reproductive health services and information. So it also is developed to actually support policy change, youth participation and partnership in the HIV response. We can all say as young people that over time we've always seen how young youth-led organizations and young key population-led organizations are being engaged, not really as partners, but as beneficiaries, which the Uproot, it tends to actually change those narratives, because there's a lot of value that young people bring into the discussion, into those strategies that you actually develop. So it's uprooting those issues. So the scorecard tool itself and methodology was actually reviewed and upgraded in 2020. So in 2020, after running the first phase from 2017, we realized that a lot of things had changed. There was also COVID, and we needed to, go back and look at the tool itself and see, oh, are there anything that we needed to change to ensure that, young people, youth-led organizations are able to use this scorecard itself this uproot tool itself in engaging at and also mobilizing movements at the country level. So what we decided to do was to engage global networks like Youth Lead, Y Plus Global, and also representatives of youth-led networks and led organizations, the young people population organization at the country level, to be part of the process and look, oh, what needs to change in terms of this this tool itself. So we also looked back at the recommendations given by the previous implementers to ensure that yes, some of those changes are incorporated into it. And the whole idea is just because during ideation, during reviews, we believe that for us to actually say we actually engage young people meaningfully, they are supposed to be part of all the processes. So it's not just, in as much as the pact is a youth-led organization, we felt that the inputs that would be brought by other youth networks and youth organizations would be valued into the process, and also ensure that the tool itself is more comprehensive to feed to address needs of young people as well. So so far more than 16 scorecards has been developed. I can tell you of that, and and we are still currently implementing. Next slide, please. So a bit about what the methodology and uproot looks at. So the scorecard itself, it rates national HIV response in 5 strategic thematic areas. So first of all, it looks at policies. It looks at participation level. It looks at partnership. It looks at if young people are even benefiting within the response. It also looks at leadership. I know the first speaker before Venetia had said something about the ethical and the meaningful and ethical guideline that was developed in collaboration with Y Plus Global. If you read through that, and also if you read through the global guideline itself, you'd see like there are some key components that you need to actually incorporate into the programs that you're actually implementing to show that yes, that youths are being engaged meaningfully, and that youths itself are the ones actually telling you, oh, this is what needs to be done. This is what needs to be done for our constituency. And what we felt was, if you go at country level, a lot of persons can tell you, you can go to the government at country level. They'll be like, oh yes, we're engaging young people. We're putting them in spaces where they can, influence decisions around policy change, around legal change, around the response. Oh yes, you can also meet some IPs who tell you, oh, we are partnering with organizations, youth-led organizations, but how are you partnering with this organization? It needs to be clear. Are you partnering with them in a technistic matter where you bring them to a space to talk about their issues, and at the end of the day, they are not being supported at the grassroots level to engage with their with youth? That's not ethical. So so basically, that's what the scorecard actually looks at. It looks at if the laws that exist within the country still serves as barrier, if the policy still serves as a barrier itself, and it leverages on two strong approach, which is qualitative data, where we use the experiences of these young people, the youth-led organization, the young key population organization. Okay, what is your idea around this? Has there been any policy change in terms of participation? Are you people participating around in policy reviews? Are you participating in the programs being implemented by the government? Those, and also we also leverage not just experiences. There are, of course, there are data government has already developed. So we also look at, based on the experiences shared by the youths themselves, we use that to complement the available data at the country level, and we also look at UNAIDS data for the country itself and be like, oh, this is what the data is saying. If this is done, and we try as much as possible that when we're engaging with country youth partners around this scorecard process, we also ensure that all the population of youth itself is actually covered. We all understand that youth are not an homogeneous group, but an heterogeneous group that actually has heterogeneous needs. And we can't, we ensure that all those youth population itself are actually captured in this process. I'll talk more about it in the next slide, please. Next slide, please. So in 2022, sorry, we had some funding from USAID through UNAIDS, to implement, to scale what has been done in 2017 to 2020. So so after the reviews itself, it was important that after reviewing the tool itself, it would be good that engage some of these partners to use the tool to actually work, and let's see what the lessons are saying. Let's learn from it. And we are doing this in partnership with the youth, and we're not doing this as just subgranting to them on the basis of them benefiting from the process, but because we actually understand the value they bring into the process itself. That's why we are, our strategy is being like a co-development process, co-implementing process, that's more like a supportive role, and allow them decide and drive the process itself. So we implemented in 3 countries in 2022, and we plan to scale up in this year to about 6 to 7 countries. Discussions have been in place. So we implemented in Nigeria, which was implemented by the organization called Association of Positive Youth Living with HIV in Nigeria. We also implemented in Madagascar by Alternative Madagascar, also in Indonesia by Itim Muda. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to say how we have ensured that the global meaningful adolescent and youth engagement and are incorporated within the project itself. Okay, thank you very much, Karabo. I'll try to be fast about it. So we looked at 4 places. We looked at ideation process, ensuring that this tool itself is being reviewed by young people themselves. We collaboratively with these young people. Well, also while implementing, we also ensure that the young people are the ones driving the implementation process, while the pact supports them. Then in terms of mobilizing movement, we co-developed an advocacy roadmap, not necessarily saying that, the pact, we have the experience, why not we just develop the advocacy roadmap in collaboration with UNAs? But no, we actually understood the value that these youth organizations bring in. So we worked hand in hand with them, to develop this advocacy roadmap to address the issues that they've done. Then also in terms of optimizing learning, we also supported young people, in terms of abstract submission, which Venetia and our colleagues led. Also leveraging on some of the conferences that are coming. And we did this because we believe that it's best that they tell their stories themselves, and ensuring that they feel part of the movement itself. They know that we are the ones doing this, in as much as we are getting the funding from. But please, next slide quickly. So the journey, basically, the implementation process is more of a global capacity strengthening on the tool itself. Then they had a country consultation with youth-led networks, young key population, and government parastatals. So it was not just done by youth themselves, government parastatals as well as UN bodies at country level. Then there was a consensus meeting with these organizations. Then the co-development of the advocacy roadmap. Then the digital advocacy campaign. And in 2023, we are looking at supporting on ground advocacy initiatives to address those issues. Next slide, please. So our strategic approach to MAE is more of human-centered design. So we always put the youth at the center of the whole design process and ensure that the youths are the intersection of the issues and what we intend to do. Then youth-led social accountability, using these youths themselves to gather this data, and also using these youth themselves, using this data to actually advocate at their country level while we support. Next slide, please. So some of the Nigeria results are, I'm sure this slide is going to be shared with you. So I'm going to quickly jump quickly because of time. But this is more what the tool looks like. It's easy to feel, and also when you're done, you are able to, impute the results of the sheets. Then the result, based on the results, you'll be able to see where the country is in terms of the 5 thematic areas that I initially mentioned. Next slide, please. This is more like what the tool is also saying. Next slide. So you can see where you talk about laws, where you record participation, where you record partnerships. You can see the results. Next slide. For beneficiaries as well, for leadership as well. Next slide. So basically, I just want to give you some few results from Nigeria itself. So you can see that based on the results here, you can see that majority is 3.66/10. So based on that result, you can see what it means for you to have to score that much. And same for participation. Next slide. Thank you, Karabo. 1 minute. Same thing for partnership beneficiaries. I'm sure the slide is going to be shared with you all and you'll be able to see some of these. Next slide. So like telling you more of how we are able to ensure that we meaningfully engage youth constituency. You can see the constituencies that are represented: young people who use drug, adolescent girls, young people with disability, young people living with HIV, LGBTQIA persons, and we also ensure that young people in humanitarian settings are represented. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is not the Nigerian conclusion, but basically this is a conclusion from our previous rollout. So it's saying that, it's an enlightening and empowering process for young people, and it's also a platform for young people to put forward recommendations on how to improve policy formation and implementation of laws and so. So basically, all I have to say is these are ways that we've been using to engage young people, and not just only ways. We also have other initiatives where we've been engaging young people meaningfully and ethically to ensure that, yes, we're able to address issues within the HIV response. So next slide. So I'll stop here for now, and I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you, and over to you. Back to Venetia.
Thank you for the opportunity. I think we definitely learned a lot, especially I believe the tool is one of the tools that could be used for other young people to benefit from, and also especially when we get to talk about meaningful youth engagement, this is one of the tools that will make sure that young people are not used in a form of tokenism in order for them to be beneficiaries. I believe we will move on to the next presentation. The next presentation is how can you measure if you are meaningfully engaging youth? A country study from Zimbabwe. On that particular, we have Sibonginkosi Mashapadzi. Then we'll have Lukmo Pamizai. And just to touch a brief on the profiles, Lukmo Benson Pamizai is an HIV and youth key population advocate who believes in amplifying the youth the voices of young people in their diversity, especially in issues around access to integrated SRHR and HIV youth-friendly services and meaningful youth engagement. Lookmore is passionate about creating linkages between communities and health services and enabling sexual and reproductive health and rights for young people and their diversity. Lookmore studied project management and clinical HIV management, and now he's pursuing his studies in ICT and social work. We will also have Sibonginkosi Mashapadzi. I hope I'm pronouncing the surname right, or else they'll correct me. Is a devoted development practitioner, passionate about peace and youth development. She is the current secretariat for the Youth Network on Sexual Reproductive Health, HIV and AIDS, where she has made it her mandate to advocate for meaningful youth engagement in all spheres. She is an AGYW champion for the South to South Learning Network. She also works with young people with disabilities in Zimbabwe to increase their access to SRH information and seasoned CSE facilitators. I think they are ready to take on that presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Trevor. Compliments of the day to you all. Just like what Trevor had said, my name is Lakmo Benson Pamizai, the current National Facilitator for Young People's Network on Sexual Reproductive Health, HIV and AIDS. So basically, Nyasha introduced us to an interesting question where she asked us if we are meaningfully engaging young people in our organizations. So I think it was very difficult for many of us to respond to that question, because if you are not measuring meaningful youth engagement in your organization, so it becomes very difficult for you to know if you are meaningfully engaging them or not. So maybe for the benefit of those that are hearing about the network for the first time, next slide. So we are Young People's Network. This is a network which was coordinated, which was convened by the National AIDS Council of Zimbabwe with support from the Ministry of Health and Child Care, UN agencies and other development partners. So our purpose is just, we are the coordinated voice of young people in the multi-sectoral response to SRHR and HIV. And also we also coordinate a multi-sectoral response to HIV and AIDS among youth-serving, youth-led and youth-focused organizations in Zimbabwe. And the vision of the network is just to make sure that young people in their diversity, they fully access their sexual and reproductive health rights. And currently, as we are speaking, the network is present in all the 10 provinces of the country, which makes up 86 National AIDS Council of Zimbabwe supported districts. And in terms of our membership, we have members that are coming from a minimum of 17 sectors. Remember, as young people, we are not a homogeneous group. And when it comes to the issue of access to services or HIV or SRHR, we have different needs. So we all want those needs to be catered for. So the role of these sector reps, they serve a 2-year term whereby they will be taking up sexual and reproductive health and HIV issues from their peers, from their respective sectors, and then they lead advocacy in their space, contributing to the national advocacy, and at the same time providing feedback to young people in their constituency. So I will share with you the structure. Next slide. So this is the structure. It's really important to let you know about this structure because it is one of the tools that makes it easy for us to measure youth participation in different spaces. So the young people that I was talking about, those sector members, they are not just random young people from the streets, but they are young people who are coming from different organizations that are programming HIV or SRHR. So after having those young people, one per sector, they make up what we call a district young people's network on sexual reproductive health HIV team. So at this level, there are certain forums or meetings which are held, which include what we call the District AIDS Action Committee, the stakeholders, the task force, the health committees. Also, all these young people, one of them who is the district facilitator is responsible for representing young people on all these forums that take place at this level. And then all those district facilitators will make up what we call a provincial young people's network, where we also have forums where we expect them to be part of when it comes to our national HIV response. These are key platforms in which young people should always be engaged. And then at national level, we have so many forums, the technical working groups, the national adolescent and sexual reproductive forums, the technical review panels, the boards, etc. And then at regional and international networks, just like SSLN, we have AFRIAN, we have Safeguard Young People's Program. So moving on to the next slide, which is the main reason for this presentation on how do we measure meaningful youth engagement. So as the network, we have two tools that we use. The first one is called the Activity Log Review tool. And then the second one is called Meaningful Youth Engagement Evaluation tool. So for the first one, the Activity Log Review tool, this one is specifically for young people. We use it to measure participation of young people in key programs, events, or meetings that have effect on them. For example, let's say there is a consultation, there's a public hearing, or a policy review, or strategic plan review, everything like that. So we'll be looking at the level of participation, the satisfaction, and we'll be also touching on the minutes of the program to see if young people were part of the program or they were just there for decoration. So just like what I've said, data collection is done by young people themselves, since we'll be measuring youth participation from their own perspective. And then this tool is administered after every activity has been done. And most of the time, after proper paperwork, materials like register, agenda, minutes, and activity reports have been availed. Because we will be looking at if the contributions that young people gave are also part of the report, or they were just there to sit, to decorate the event. So the sources that we use, so we use the attendance registers. We also check the agenda of the program, the event or the meeting, and also the minutes, if it was a meeting, and then the activity report. Now moving on to the at program or organizational level. So this too is meant to measure how effective organizations are committing themselves to promote youth engagement, focusing on resources. I think the first speaker talked about this, capacity building, and how young people are structurally involved in planning, designing, implementing, and evaluating of HIV programs for young people. It's one thing to create spaces for young people, but it's another thing to ensure that young people, they meaningfully participate in those spaces. So there is need for resources to ensure that, yes, we have young people as part of our organization, but we need to invest in them so that when they enter into different spaces, they can meaningfully represent their constituents. And then in terms of administering the tool, so this tool is flexible. The organization can administer the tool themselves if they want to evaluate themselves to see if they are really promoting meaningful youth engagement, and to also identify areas they need to address. And then it can also be administered by young people. Remember, we have young people in our organizations, so you can give the tool to young people so that they can evaluate their organization to see if it's promoting youth participation or not. So this is really easy for us as the network, because remember, we said our members, they are coming from youth-led, youth-serving, and youth-focused organizations. So these are not random young people that are not part of the programs that are being carried out in that organization. So this one usually administered annually, so as to give the organization time to implement some of the recommendations that we do after data analysis. So some of these data sources for this too that we would want to check is the organizational strategic documents and the policies, financial budgets, as well as the board's meetings. Next slide. Okay, so this is just like a clip of some of the measurement statement and the indicators that we will be looking at youth level. So the measurement statement will be trying to see if young people are being engaged meaningfully in policy or a program, that is design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation level. So the indicator, we're just looking at how many young people, the percentage of youth that are participating in those programs. I think of late, we have been having challenges of saying one young person will be part of the activity. And then during the process, there will be group works, like 4 group works. Let's say, for example, another group is focusing on HIV, another group is focusing on TB, another group maybe on services or HIV treatment to be specific, another one on HIV prevention. So this one young person who is part of the process cannot break here or himself to join all those groups. All these issues we have issues of young people that are part of all the groups that are there. So we need to make sure that we increase the number of young people that are participating in our processes. And then the second thing is youth are engaged in governing on decision-making bodies. We're also looking at the number. And then the third one, youth voices are shared and valued. I think I talked about the issue of going through the minutes after the activity or the process. So we can check the minutes and then see, we can check the report and see if the youth voices are being shared or are being valued. And then youth have opportunities to make community contribution. So this specifically focuses more on the issue of advisory boards, panels, the technical review panels, the program planning panels, etc. Next slide. And the next one on program level, we'll be focusing on participation policies in place. If the organization have youth participation policy developed, and if it's there, is it being implemented? Is it non-discriminatory? And was the policy developed in collaboration with the youth? So I think there is data sources that we talked about, which really shows if those processes were involving young people at the organization. Then focusing on the issue of resources, we want to see that which percentage of the budget on the program or organization in which the organization spends on youth participation, be it capacity building or supporting young people to participate in different forums which are really important for them. Of late, we know that there are processes that are happening for PEPFAR, for Global Fund, and there is need to support young people to be part of those processes. So we want to see the amount of resources these organizations are committing to youth participation. And then we also want to see a diverse group of youth. We talked about us as a network which have young people in all their diversity. So we want to see if the organization is a diverse group of youth representing all affected population, including the most vulnerable, marginalized youth populations. So we check the youth advisory board if it's there, and then we also check the level of diversity in terms of representation of young people in the organization or the spaces that have been created within that organization. And also in terms of differentiated service delivery, does the organization provide services that are tailored to meet the needs of youth? So want to increase responsive or characteristics of program organization. So we have a few organizations that we have used this tool before, and they have some comments that they have shared with us pertaining the tool. Next slide. All right, so since 2007, the network have strengthened meaningful youth engagement. And if you can see in Zimbabwe currently, these are some of the big organizations that we have, which are youth-led, youth-focused, and youth-serving. So we are seeing that Zandiri created a youth advisory board, and Plan International also established a youth advisory panel, and the Zimbabwe National Family Planning Council, which is one of the parastatals, also introduced a youth action. I will jump the next slide with some quotes because of time. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yes. So in terms of lesson learned, we saw that it is important to consider how to measure the level and value of youth participation. So this measurement, it not only helps to track the result of such engagement of youth and other program outcomes, but it also helps to ensure that the opportunities that are being provided for participation are constructive and substantial. So in conclusion, we want you to learn that it is very important because it helps us to understand what works. It also helps us to understand the barriers and the solutions, as well as evidence-based programming. And it also helps to inform capacity strengthening, accountability to donors, and also helps to ensure that the opportunities that we are providing for young people to participate are constructive. So without further ado, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Lukmo, for that opportunity. And I think it's amazing to see young people and how we have the skills and we have the necessary talents to actually deliver and make an impact to other young people throughout the continent of Africa and globally. Thank you, Lukmo, for that presentation. I think for now, I will hand over to Nadu to continue with the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trevor. And thank you to all our speakers. The presentation has been insightful. I know most of our participants have a lot of questions or contribution, also to share experiences from their country. We have been privileged to have a case study from Zimbabwe. I know others have similar, and we want opportunity to share if they are doing anything differently or the same, so that we can learn from each other. And basically that is what the South-South learning is for us to learn from each other, all with the sole aim of making sure that HIV is eradicated and leaving no young person behind. After all, for young people, nothing about us without us. So having said that, prior to this webinar, we gave opportunities for young people around the world to share their voices or what meaningful youth engagement means to them. So we are going to play that video tagged to hear from young people in Africa and beyond, that to them, what does real meaningful youth engagement mean? So let's sit back, and whilst we are watching the video, you can draw a bit inspiration, get your thoughts together, because right after the video will be the Q&A session. Thank you. And if our technical experts could project the video for us.
Creating opportunities for us as young people to express ourselves, our voices and ideas, as well as provide input on addressing problems and finding solutions to issues that affect us as young people.
It is important to create an environment where their different needs are expressed without the fear of being invalidated or undermined.
Young people are not being judged, but held with their confidence to speak up for other age and views, and also being given a constructive feedback so that they can be able to conquer their fears.
Participatory process where young people's expertise and experiences are embraced throughout the program.
When we involve youth in policy-making decisions by the government, when we give them an unconditional positive regard, when we have a non-judgmental attitude, when we are genuine with them, when we give them safe space to talk.
You'd have to create dialogues and engage them, make them participate through your digital media platforms, your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagram, and also as part of decision making, involve them, let them be part of those decisions, in policy making and any other decision.
The opinions and contributions of young people must be taken seriously as the contributions of specialists and experts.
Ensuring that young people remain at the center of the HIV prevention response, ensuring that they're capacitated enough to be able to participate constructively into processes and policy building.
The young people are given a seat at the table when we are supported with the skills, the information, and all the necessary tools we need to contribute meaningfully to decisions that affect us.
Young people as key stakeholders in all the phases of a program life cycle, from designing the program to program implementation to program monitoring and evaluation.
Meaningful youth engagement cannot only be speaking to youth what really concerns them, but speaking to youth what concerns them in their own language.
Provide equal opportunities for all, regardless of cultural, religious, social backgrounds, gender, disability, and sexual orientation preferences.
By serving as key advocates for sexual reproductive health services, building our peer group, accessing SRH services when they need them.
Involvement in decision-making in all issues pertaining adolescent girls and young women is meaningful involvement in the DREAMS program. Choice of safe space meeting areas and decisions on clinical services to access acute-friendly safe spaces.
Not only where youth participate, but lead global movements around HIV, providing voices to the voiceless.
Power sharing is realized across all ages, and young people expertise and contribution in given equal weight, and robust youth civil society movement is supported and well resourced.
The intentional partnership between the youth, government, organizations, and other stakeholders. And this is where young people are involved in all parts of the programs, from the design to the agenda setting, to the decision making, to the implementation of these programs.
Make sure that their voices are held by implementing activities towards their ideas that they have explained during the decision making.
Meaningful youth participation is inclusive.
It recognizes the intersectionalities that exist among young people and gives each young person a seat at the table as beneficiaries, as partners, and as leaders to ensure an HIV-free world.
We are given a platform to provide our expertise and experiences in mosaic activities, and we are guided and channeled into the right direction to become experts in different work streams. Thank you.
Yes, there you have it. The voices of young people on what truly meaningful youth participation means to them. It includes capacity building for them to be able to uphold the positions, to better manage resources as we are pushing the agenda of youth-led initiative. Also being intentional about involving young people right from ideation to the agenda setting to the implementation setting. So at this juncture, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So just a quick reminder on our house rules. Kindly use the reaction button by raising your hands up if you want to make a contribution or ask our speakers a question, or you can do that through the chat box. Just for language issues, if I have a question in front, I will call on our interpreters to do that on my behalf. So, okay, so now the floor is open for question and answers, and questions and answers by our speakers. So just by way of raising your hands, you click on the reaction button, then you can raise your hands up. Okay. As we wait for questions, just to set up the tone, I have a few ones myself. So my question is to Lackmore, that I'm just curious if you could elaborate further. You made mention the lesson learned, but using the tools you have said, the data you collect, if you could reflect how this data is effectively utilized, saying it from the perspective, yes, sometimes we do the work, we identify causes, but how do we escalate to get results? So if you can share from your perspective, or even share more testimony, let me put it that way, for lack of a better word, where maybe responses generated from the tool you use and action was taken to the very end and results were seen. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Nadu, for that question. So I think I jumped a slide which had testimonials pertaining those that have used the tool, but I'll just pick one and then explain how it worked. So remember, we talked about our tool focusing in terms of looking at how young people are structurally involved in an organization in terms of designing, implementing, and evaluating programs. So for the organization, for this juncture, I will take Zimbabwe National Family Planning Council, whereby it focuses on providing youth-friendly services, mainly for SRHR and HIV. But in terms of the structure, there was no like a movement for young people, or maybe a youth advisory panel, which really comes up with initiatives to or decide which programs works for the people, for young people, etc. So after the evaluation, we then provided the recommendation to say, we think it's wise if you can now establish a youth advisory panel, which really helps you to design programs. After designing, also assist in implementing, and then after that, you can evaluate and see where you want to improve. So after those recommendations, just like what I've said, we wait for at least a year, because some of the things they involve the resources and budgets, they need to be adjusted here and there. So after that, last year, the Zimbabwe National Family Planning Council established that youth advisory panel, the youth action movement in Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much, Lakmo. So yes, colleagues, young people, this webinar is about us to share our voices. It's very interesting to hear from you. It may not necessarily be a question, but an addition, or even to share experience. What is your country doing differently or to support the agenda of meaningfully engaging young people? I'm a fan of putting people on the spot. So just know if I'm not getting any hands up, I'll be sure to randomly for someone to share. And I know we really want that. So please. Okay, I see Beauty. Beauty, I see you have, oh, you dropped the clip action.
I was clapping.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But now, since you are speaking, Beauty, do you have anything you want to share or add up to the amazing things these organizations are sharing with us, or what is your country organization doing to support the meaningful youth engagement agenda?
Thank you very much. I think Lakmo has presented what we are doing in Zimbabwe, and I just want to thank all the presenters for the excellent work they've done. And Nyasha Stole is also a product of the Young People's Network on Sexual Reproductive Health, HIV and AIDS. So I think Lakmo has summed up everything we do in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me engage my co-chair if he has anything to add, Trevor.
Hi, I think the conversations were really intriguing, especially most of the presenters that were presenting. I could reflect on what we have in Botswana. There were recent Botswana AIDS Impact Survey, which were released by the National Health Promotion Agency. And the statistics shows that young people, adults between the ages of 15 and 64, there is a rate of 0.2% of new infections, which accumulates to 2,200 new infections annually, which is really high. And I think whatever presentations that they had, especially when we get to talk about the Uproot scorecard, as one of the things that in Botswana, organizations and the government could probably benchmark on using in order to engage young people, because it has become a challenge to meaningfully engage young people that are always beneficiaries. Hence, we have the numbers that we have when it comes to new infections in Botswana. So the conversations are really intriguing, and it's something that we should continuously have. It's something that I personally would definitely want to have a conversation with the Adolescents and Young People Forum, which I'm chairing. So I think I'm glad I was listening through the presentations.
Thank you so much, Remo. Just also, I just want to engage Pat. Beautiful presentation, especially, and like the Uproot scorecard looks like a very comprehensive tool. But I'm quite curious. I from the presentations, like there are 5 major areas that the measurement takes place, but I didn't see, I may be wrong, but I didn't see anything looking at service delivery. You know, when it comes to HIV response, it's comprehensive, looking at the policies, the programs, but most of the challenges that we all know has to do with service delivery. Young people do not have access to the PrEP, even though now there are more advances or ARVs in most African regions. I know it's free, but there are still challenges in accessing it. So how does the Uproot scorecard, looking at root cause analysis, target this issue? Over to you, Vicentia Nikena.
Yes, it is a very comprehensive tool. However, it is open to the concerns of youth around the region, because it is region specific, as it has to be used as an advocacy tool at the regional level at the first go. So we have a section where we give you an open house to mention your concerns as youth. And hence, if you go through the present 3 countries that we have worked on 2022, we have highlights over service delivery as well. So that's how we comprehend this into that too. Yes, thank you for the question.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, was the Apple score an innovation by young people, just asking, or like, was it the ideation, or was it an innovation by young people, or it's an existing tool that was adapted by young people?
Okay, so Uproot as a tool arose through an UN project, which was a formulation as a response through young people. So I could gladly say that this tool is being evolved, strategized, and made by young people for the young people. Yes.
Thank you so much. Made by the young people. Thank you. So I have in the chat box said in Tanzania, the youth are engaged in technical working teams under the National AIDS Control Program. Example among the representative on technical working group working on PrEP. Thank you. Keep sending your experiences. So, okay, now the same thing from Zahara. Thank you, Zahara, for sharing what is happening in Tanzania. We still have a few time for a few more inputs. I would love to hear from other countries as well. So if you are there, Renee, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. If you can share with me what your country is doing concerning meaningful youth engagement. Renee Wayne.
Hi, yes. In fact, I'm from SYCONA, and we're working with 8 countries. So I'm based in South Africa, but I don't think I'm best placed to talk to meaningful youth engagement in South Africa. I think there are other people that are probably much better placed, including our champions from SSLN.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, I have Levy. Levy's hands is up. Levy, may speak, please.
Thank you, moderator. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity. Big thank you to all the presenters for their really insightful presentations, and a lot of food for thought, taking note that many of these best practices that have been highlighted have emerged from the Global South and have been led by young people in the Global South. Just 2 questions to all of the presenters. Firstly, on definitions, I think that there are a few evolving working definitions of what meaningful youth engagement, participation, and leadership means, and these are evolving. However, what are some of the thoughts from the young leaders in terms of how we decide upon 1 or 2 of these definitions that can be standardized across developmental agencies? So for instance, UN agencies, donor partners all have different definitions, and I fear that in this space, in the absence of a common definition, any definition then becomes the default that we set upon, and that could be the lowest common definition. So just thinking about definitions and what colleagues would think around should be proposed as a singular working definition, especially for the development community. And then going back to Lakmore's presentation, I really liked how he highlighted in their evaluation tool the issue of resources and finances in particular that goes towards supporting meaningful youth engagement, participation, and leadership. This is an issue that we've been working on as an organization, and we've been wondering, what does a collective scorecard potentially look like for donor organizations and development agencies like UN agencies in particular? Because ultimately we know from the OECD that less than 0.01% of all development aid has gone towards youth-led and youth-serving organizations over the last decade. So there's a lot of political rhetoric in terms of supporting young people, putting young people first, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of seeing that shift, in terms of resources, in terms of power, and in terms of influence, there's very little tangible action. So just wondering from colleagues, what does a framework look like that can accelerate this issue of intergenerational justice when it comes to resources for youth-led and youth-serving organizations? Thank you, moderator, back to you.
Thank you, Levi. So, yes, because of time, if Vicentia, you could respond to it first in brief, then we can proceed to our last item and wrap up.
Thank you, Nadu, for that opportunity. I think Levi did mention that it's probably a food for thought for all the presenters who presented on such issues. And because of time constraint, probably we should get to the end of the program, which I would sum up and say that meaningful youth engagement is really a critical intervention in national and local programming of each individual's country. And we should definitely make sure that there's inclusivity in when we get to do meaningful youth engagement. It's really important to see young people being developed from a stage where they were not really aware of what the situations are, to a point where they're able to influence and be part of the decision-making process and lead as they're supposed to be, because preferably they see how these situations could be solved in their favor. I believe that with our individuals' efforts and organizations and governments will collaboratively with young people, we can make such strive to fight against HIV and AIDS, which continues to be a huge problem. It continues to be a huge pandemic within our region, especially in our region, Botswana being one of the countries, if not the one globally, one of the countries that is leading when it comes to issues of HIV new infections. So I believe this was a really informative session, and what the most important question is what next? We should see all of the suggestions and ideas that we've been talking about, we should start seeing series of them being implemented, and I believe we will see efforts being made to go forward. Yeah, thank you so much. Nadia, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much, Trevor. So our time is up, but before we wrap up, we'd want to do a poll. It's just some few questions to help us have some reflections. So if we could show the poll. All right. So if you could go to menti.com, use the code as shown. And it's just a question asking now, which of the following scenarios do you relate to more about meaningful youth engagement? Then there are no right or wrong answers here, just for us to get perspective about what young people truly deem as in-depth meaningful youth engagement. So we want to do that quickly. So you have option A, young people need a supportive environment for effective advocacy where resources are made available to engage policymakers at all levels, including financial resources to fund young people's participation in outreaches and dialogues and access to trainings and advocacy skills development. You have the next option. We need more evidence on the benefit of youth engagement. Yes, we still need to work on convincing adults that it is good to engage youth. Also, in a dream world where youth engagement clauses with funding that NGOs and governments receive would require them to engage young people. And lastly, ideally, meaningful youth engagement is normalized across the spheres of policy development, advocacy, project development, and service delivery. Young people in all of their diversity are enabled and empowered to have their voices heard and their concerns listened and responded to and their ideas and projects supported and engaged with and implemented. So quickly on Menti, so that we can get your idea, we can do that in about 2 minutes. Then we officially draw the curtains. As we wait for the responses, just by way of concluding, it's been an awesome webinar. We've learned a lot. And personally, I want to admonish all young people on call that we have to keep up the fight to make sure that we are not only seen as beneficiaries, but like I said, they are intentional by engaging us. And also, most importantly, build our capacities to be well equipped. We need to justify our inclusion, because it's not by virtue of only being a young person that opportunities should come to you. You need to also put in an effort. So young people should do our very best so that when we get these opportunities, we live up to them and pave the way for other young people. Trevor, you have any last words to add? Then we can end our webinar. Trevor. Okay.
Thank you, Nadu. Sorry for taking too long. Probably it was the network, and I think so far it was an amazing session, and we will see with how people responded to the last poll. It's really intriguing to see how each individual see things from that perspective. So we'll definitely dwell onto the result from the poll and see which which option or which perspective do people really see or think about meaningful youth engagement more. It was a wonderful session for me to be part of this, and I'm really excited to be part of this journey in trying to shape how we see and how we implement meaningful youth engagement to make sure that even generations to come, they find something that is really solid, something that they could really build on in order to fight against HIV and AIDS, and definitely to make sure that all the efforts and decisions which are made for young people, they were part and process of the decisions from the beginning to the final decisions where reporting is made and we find way forward to other solutions. So thank you so much, Asante Sana. Till we meet next time.
Okay, thank you. So just to say thank you to our conveners, SYCONA, South Learning Network. Thank you so much. I know this initiative is a follow-up from engagement in Bulawayo, where young people had a preliminary session or a side session on youth engagement. And you saw the need for us to escalate and share this beautiful thought with other young people worldwide. I want to say thank you to all the team for making this webinar possible. And we know this is not the only webinar, there are more to come and more insightful sessions ahead. Thank you all. And okay, just by way of responses, we had 64 of our respondents choosing option A, 9% choosing option B, and 27% choosing option C. Okay, thank you all so much for the submissions. And I think this is where we say, till we meet again, and in Ghana, I'll say, over to you, to our conveners.